The idea of an artwork being a permanent commodity, of being an object that encapsulates an idea, for me, is something I've always struggled with. I prefer the idea that the artwork's interaction with its audience, the way in which it changes your sense of place, the way in which it affects your perception of yourself, is probably as important as the physicality of the object itself. The Geyser has been restaged after 25 years as part of the Thames Festival, following conversations with some of the festival organisers who, I think because of their continued interest in temporary projects, experimental projects, had somehow seen reference to the original installation in Birmingham. Reintroducing it is probably more a memory of the idea of using artwork as an interruption in the landscape, so it's more about trying to create space in the imagination for people to question what should be there in the future. As part of the wider narrative of the Thames Festival, which is very much about trying to offer communities the opportunity to take ownership for a short period of time of the culture and the events around their landscape, it seemed appropriate to bring it back. So the Geyser itself uses a borehole pump. It's a big 120 kilo pump that is underwater and generates an enormous amount of pressure, and it compresses in 5 chambers to create a jet that will rise to about 31 meters. When it's not running, you'll probably just see a black disc 60 meters away from the shore, because all of the workings are simply floating under the water. This is hopefully the only part which anyone will see. So this is foam that's been cut and carved to try and make this circle. And if the maths is correct, this should be more than we need to support the entire structure. But the hope is that the vast majority will be underwater and there will simply be a small section which will be visible. This project began in 1997. I was invited to apply to propose a public artwork by a firm called Shillam & Smith, an architecture firm. They had a mandate to try and improve the landscape and to try and affect the planning, and that the plans didn't reflect the cultural diversity and the complexity of the communities that were there. And I was invited to propose whatever I thought might be relevant to the area. I thought that something which was not language-based would be maybe a unifying feature. And speaking with local school kids, we decided to come up with an idea to try and make the biggest thing, the biggest of something. I proposed a geyser, a bit like Old Faithful, an erupting geyser that would be the tallest fountain in the world without a lake. That was the plan. I decided to choose a piece of wasteland called Couchman Road Park. It was called a park, but it was essentially used for burning cars. But it became a meeting point, and the parents came to follow their children to find out why they were all coming home soaking wet in the middle of the summer, and the architects were there to meet them, and it ended up being something which not only created a landmark which was based in memory, ultimately, and changed people's perception of that little piece of ground, but it also opened up the possibility for a really interesting conversation between the architects, the planners, and the people that would be affected by their decisions. The Royal Docks, constructed with enormous money and effort, with support from Parliament, when it lost its original purpose, still remained as this enormous structure. I think Europe's largest enclosed body of water at one point, that I think has an enduring fascination because its history is so varied and because its future is quite ambiguous in terms of how it will look in the next 50 years. Seen as without value to some extent, and then was reinvented and is still in the process of being reshaped in terms of the public imagination. I would hope that the project has a similar role in provoking curiosity, discussion about what should be in the landscape. The geyser was always intended to not be fully explained so that people would find it, see it as an anomaly and wonder why it was there, and whether it was always going to be there or whether it was a figment of their imagination and that kind of thing. The interaction with the community in this case is less a direct relationship between me and one group, and it's more to do with being part of a festival which engages with many communities and which tries to bring local people to kind of claim ownership of the imagination of their area, but also encourages people to visit parts of London that they might not have seen before or that they might not be familiar with. The geyser will only run for a few days. There are certain times in the day where you feel quite confident you would see something. And there'll be certain periods of the day sometimes where there's actually quite regular intervals where this might happen, other times where it's much more intermittent. And that will all be visible on the Totally Thames website. And there's kind of schedules there which will allow people, if they choose to find it deliberately as opposed to catching it through their peripheral vision as a surprise, they can do that.